Today's show is sponsored by Mergify. Mergify is a tool for GitHub that prioritizes queues and automatically merges, comments, rebases, updates, labels, backports, closes, and assigns your pull requests. Mergify features allow you to automate what you would normally do manually. You can secure your code using a merge queue, automatically merge it, and many more features. By saving time, you and your team can focus on projects that matter. Mergify is coordinated with any CI and fully integrated into GitHub. Check out their startup program that could give your company a 12-month credit to leverage Mergify up to a $21,000 value. Start saving time. Visit Mergify.com to sign up for a demo and get started today. That's Mergify.com.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hope everybody is doing well. We continue to move through January of 2022. Hope everybody's having a good start to the new year. And, this week, typically in the beginning of this slot, we would do Cloud News of the Week. And this week, we're going to kind of skip that, mostly because there wasn't a whole lot of news this week. There was some odds and ends things, but not the normal stuff that we typically would cover in terms of new funding rounds or, big new announcements or big new technologies. Microsoft did announce, and this was literally sort of breaking news, if you will. Microsoft announced that it was making about a $70 billion acquisition of Activision Blizzard. But since that really literally just happened probably a couple of hours ago and the numbers are still coming out and the details are still coming out, we're going to kind of skip diving into that. Typically something that big, which would literally be the largest acquisition or technology acquisition of all time, I think. We'll probably hold that off to some other Cloud News of the Week when we actually do a show on it, although we typically don't cover gaming so much. I think the angle that's being pushed on this is really around, somewhat gaming, but also sort of this sort of metaverse and future collaboration, virtual world sort of angle. So we'll dig into that one a little bit later. But other than that, there wasn't a lot of news. So we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on the Cloud News of the Week beginning segment today because there just isn't much there. We don't want to waste your time. We do have a very interesting show. We are going to dive into Web3, which is going to be sort of a look ahead show as we've done the last couple of weeks, sort of a look ahead to 2022. And I know Web3 gets a lot of different opinions about people. What we tried to do with this show was not sort of make it a hype show. There are lots and lots of things out there, lots of podcasts out there about different Web3 technologies. But really what we did was we had a really interesting chance to kind of just dig into the thought process behind it, some of the technology behind it, try to be as neutral as possible. But our guest is not only somebody who I personally think is a really good teacher of technologies and technology trends, but also somebody who's been working in this space and really trying to understand it from a technology perspective, from a usefulness perspective. And so I think you're going to enjoy this show. Whatever preconceived notions you may have about Web3, we'd ask that you just put them aside for now. Take a listen. I think you're going to find that there's a lot of useful information in this conversation. We tried to break down the basics, tried to break down sort of the motivations behind some of it, tried to stay away from a lot of the headlines that are going on out there. So hopefully, as we do with most things with the Cloudcast, this should be educational, hopefully give you a starting point. If this is a topic or kind of the breadth of topics that you may want to dig into a little bit more, there are some number of things that'll be in the show notes as well, and some really great references, from our speaker. So let's get to that right after the break. Today's show is sponsored by CloudZero. For software-driven companies focused on growing margins, CloudZero is the only cloud cost intelligence platform that puts engineering in control by connecting technical decisions to business results. By analyzing cloud services like AWS and Snowflake, CloudZero provides real-time cost insights that help you maximize margins. Engineering teams can answer critical questions like, who are my most expensive customers? How much does this specific feature cost our business? What's the cost impact of re-architecting this application? With cost anomaly alerts via Slack, product-specific data views, and granular engineering context that makes it easy to investigate any cost, CloudZero is your complete cloud cost intelligence platform, connecting the dots between high-level trends and individual line items. Join companies like Drift, Rapid7, and SeatGeek by visiting cloudzero.com/cloudcast to get started today. That's cloudzero.com/cloudcast. Today's show is sponsored by Datadog. Now with cloud security posture management, Datadog allows you to see compliance scores across your infrastructure and track conformance to industry benchmarks such as CIS and other regulatory standards. Out-of-the-box cloud and infrastructure configuration rules. Datadog Cloud Security Posture Management, CSPM, performs configuration audits across cloud accounts, hosts, and containers. As a special offer for Cloudcast listeners, you can sign up for a free 2-week trial to see for yourself how Datadog can elevate your cloud infrastructure security posture by going to datadog.com/security-cloudcast. That's datadog.com/security-cloudcast. Sign up now and receive a free Datadog t-shirt. And we're back. And Aaron, we're gonna dig into what's become sort of your favorite topic, man. We're doing these look ahead shows, and we decided, Web3, although it's a huge topic and probably way too much for one show in itself, but we're going to kind of dig into it. So I'm excited, man. Give me a little bit of before we dive into this, give me a little bit of your kind of initial take on you've been going through this sort of journey of learning Web3. Where are you at right now?
Yes. Well, it's been super interesting because, I decided, months ago at this point, I was going to start to wrap my head around crypto and Web3 and NFTs and all of these other things coming around. And so I went out and started listening to some podcasts and on Twitter and YouTube and all the usual ways that we tend to learn these days. And it was really interesting. Like, you and I had this great side conversation. The biggest problem I had was actually getting to the information, like real information. There was a lot out there, and it was a lot of folks like, hey, here's all the cryptocurrency you need to buy, and you're going to be a millionaire, and I was like, I don't care about any of that. Like, I was really interested in blockchain and Web3, and I'm an infrastructure person at heart, and I was like, I wanted to learn about the details, and there was no real. At first glance, it took a while to kind of get past that the cruft, if you will, and so that's like, again, this is looking ahead. I really wanted to get into this topic in particular because it digs a little deeper than, hey, what coins are going to make you a millionaire or a billionaire, right?
Yeah. So we're definitely not gonna do that. We're not gonna Matt Damon you. We're not gonna do any of those things. But so I've been, we've told the audience before, like, I've been doing some stuff to sort of learn some basic programming stuff. I've been digging into Python and some other things. And one of the ways I've been going about doing that is some of these online courses. And one of the people who teaches these, I feel, is really, really good at it. And so we're really excited to have Chris Castiglione, who is not only co-founder of 1 Month to Code, or 1 Month, but also Adjunct Professor at Columbia Business School, but also founded Stacks.btc, Stacks. Chris, welcome to the show. We want to dive into this. We're really excited to have you on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. This is so great.
So let's, I mentioned I sort of have this informal relationship with you because you've been kind of online teaching me certain things around code, but give folks a little bit of your background, because you're a man with many skills. You're somebody who has self-taught yourself a lot of these things. You're an educator. You do this for a living, kind of talking about and teaching technology as well as using it. But give folks a little bit about your background and we'll dig into this. We'll dig into this really broad topic.
Totally. Yeah. Sometimes I don't know where to start, your life story kind of thing, but I sometimes start with the fact that I was a music major in college. And I start there because, like, to me, coding and the internet, I could care less. Like, back and I'm dating myself a little bit, but this is around like 2002 when I was in college. Like, I was just like, I don't know, what is this whole internet thing? You know what I mean? But the thing that really brought me into it was Napster, and just the power of being able to all of a sudden, LimeWire, Napster, all of a sudden, like, I was in a band and I could put my music on the internet and anyone around the world could, like, download it and share it. And I just saw that, like, possibility, and it really just opened my eyes to the power of, like, what the internet could do. Again, this is like 2002, around, like, kind of pre-Facebook, pre-Spotify, and so I was just like, wow, I really want to learn to code. I really want to, like, it just felt like I think freedom is really important to me in my life. Yeah. Like, not for me particularly, I don't know, I have to, like, clarify, not in like a libertarian, like, whatever. I don't know. I'm not so politically, that's not a political statement as much as just, like, the ability to, like, be creatively free, I would say, is what I'm talking about. Like to make things and share them freely and have other people appreciate them, and like not have to worry about the gatekeepers creatively that are going to, you know, produce my album or my book or whatever. So that, you know, that was like, wow, I want to like really follow that path. So I quit being a music major senior year, taught myself how to code. And yeah, I started developing apps and did that for a while until I realized how fun it was to teach other people, just hang out with people and watch them, you know, build really cool things. And I started following that path. I started at a company called General Assembly in 2011, which was at the time 6 people in New York. And it's like maybe 1,000 people now around the world. It's like a big school. So that was a really exciting time, kind of being at the forefront of one of the first coding boot camps in New York City, or maybe in the world. And then, from there started my own company called 1 Month, which my co-founder and I really tried. We were both teaching in-person boot camps and really wanted to take the best of what we were learning in the classroom and bring it online. And this was around 2013. Started 1 month in order to, really scale that to more people who weren't just in New York, weren't just, didn't have $10,000 to spend on boot camps, but maybe had a few hundred to do it online. And that was our vision. And so, that's kind of that's kind of how I got to where I am now. I guess just really passionate about education and really passionate about expanding the future of the internet, I'd say is kind of where I came from.
Nice. And Chris, so let's start to dig into Web3. So kind of twofold question. First of all, how did you start to get involved into Web3? And then, but I also figure out we probably need to clarify, right? Because Web3 can be such a big concept. And you build Web3, you explain Web3. Like, how do you even get started with terminology, definitions, and then teach others to dive in as well?
Yeah. Let me clarify. Yeah, what I'm working on right now. I think that might be a good place to start, to be honest. Right now I'm working in the. I want to use a lot of big words, but I'll kind of clarify what they all mean if the audience isn't familiar. But I'm working to evolve Web3 and to build Web3 tooling, and I'll explain what that is. And I'm working in an ecosystem of a variety of tools to make that happen. It's called the Stacks ecosystem, and we're building apps on Bitcoin. So let me rewind. I know it's a mouthful. Let me start with the definition of how I see what Web3 is doing and what really inspires me. Web3 to me is a new way to coordinate people, and it's built on a model of trust, right? And so right now, if you understand how the current world works, their entire system is built on trust, right? So everything you do in your life involves some amount of trust, whether you have a bank account, let's say, right? That's like the easy kind of example to look at. If you look at a bank account, the fact that we're talking on this podcast right now, and we're not like, we're freaking out that our money might be getting plundered by pirates, is because we trust Bank of America or whatever, our Chase or whatever our bank is. We trust them that they're gonna take our money and like hold it for us, then we can get it anytime we want. We trust the government that's going to not print money overnight to devalue that money. We trust security on that money, like on the hackers aren't going to take it. Like there's a variety of amount of trust that we do, and we pay for that trust right now, right? And a lot of times that trust gets abused. Banks are hacked. 2008 bank financial collapse. Banks have had problems. Money is getting printed every night, and so this is just an example with money. But the thing I'm trying to point to is not the money thing, because that's what often gets like. There's a lot of money to be made in Web3 or in crypto, and I feel like that narrative often gets all the attention and confuses the whole thing. But really where we want to focus on is the trust aspect of this. And money is just kind of one way that, it gets distributed. But the trust aspect is that in our world right now, trust is being distributed and we are paying for it. We pay the bank, we pay taxes to the government. And so Web3 and really the evolution of the internet here with crypto is just a way of making that trust like a utility, like making it something that we can tap into and we can build sites on, that we can build organizations around, whether they're DAOs, which are these new web3 decentralized organizations, and just figure out new ways of coordinating trust. So maybe I'll start there. It's kind of big. Hit me up with any questions. I don't know if that was too much to start with.
So how do you? So I've tried to explain some of this like to my kids and so forth.
Yeah.
So how do you explain trust? Because it's our inherent nature is like you said, use the bank example. Like mostly the banks do things right, and sometimes they get some things wrong, or governments print money and inflation happens. Like those things sort of happen, but like people have a certain amount of inherent trust, and maybe it's just sort of culturally built up. It's like, oh, there's a building. That building probably has my money, or that building has a man with a gun in front of it who's the security person. Like I suspect he probably can stop bad people. Like, how do you explain trust to people when they're like, it's on the internet and I don't really know where that is, and I don't know who's behind these things? Like, how do you kind of explain to people the concept of sort of distributed trust when you can't sort of point to something and say, yeah, that's the thing that you kind of have to put your inherent trust in?
That's a really good point. I think this is part of the growing pains of this kind of movement. Just to say, Web3 is an umbrella term that's being used now to describe, cryptocurrency is part of that, blockchain is part of that. It's kind of like a rebranding in a way.
Sure.
So I'm just saying that for the audience, if anybody's not clear. So I think all of these things, I think that's a big challenge of the movement, because there's clearly like a pushback or reluctance of people to get on board, right? If this really is the best thing in the world for the planet or for our economy, why are people still reluctant? We saw last week Mozilla stopped accepting crypto payments for certain reasons we could talk about. But I think the challenge there is education, right? Because we don't know right now how our current systems work. A lot of people, we just kind of like, they're like invisible,
Yeah.
They're like, you're right. You see the guy with the gun outside the bank. I don't know what that communicates. That communicates power. Somebody powerful is watching over your money, and so I should trust them. But I guess my hope would be, and the reason that I'm also working on a book and that I'm working in this ecosystem is, I would hope that just as with the internet, everyone 4 billion people in the world use the internet like every day, more or less. And we don't know how the internet works. We don't know, how electricity works. We use these things all the time. I think at some level, there's a basic level of education, I think, that we have to get to, that we can bring ourselves to trust it. And I think a lot of times trust also happens just because you see somebody else doing it. If you just really unpack the way our brains work, you're like, all right, that person's driving around in a metal box at 80 miles per hour. I guess I could try that too, get in the car or use the internet or something. So yeah. I think there's just a learning curve, and I think it takes time.
Sure.
And if I take the trust concept even a little bit further and then apply it to, our audience tends to come from a more infrastructure centric and public cloud centric background, and we talk about distributed systems, right? And so when we talk about Web3, a lot of times we talk about distributed systems. And so can you help everyone a little bit with, distributed systems and centralization, and then you'll hear things like, especially in crypto circles, like on-ramps. Right? What is the concept of an on-ramp to a distributed system?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I'm actually curious, when you say you talk about distributed systems, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm curious, like, how would you define, because I have my own idea and I feel like I've heard it defined, there's like a variety of different ways to think about that. how do you describe like a distributed system, like in a way that you can communicate it on a podcast with audio to other people? I'm curious, like how you would describe that.
Well, I'll take a shot, and Brian, you tell me if you agree as
Because
well.
it's complex, so I'd love to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. My way of thinking of it is, these centralized systems, again, public cloud, an AWS service, right? Every AWS owns everything. The data goes to AWS. You couldn't necessarily be a participant in the system, right? It's a closed wall ecosystem, right? For me, a distributed system is something more of like, hey, I could participate in it. I could store part of it. I could, do some kind of calculation. And so for me, the idea there is more of it being distributed, being decentralized as well as distributed, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think it's sort of, like you said, it depends on how you define it, right? We've had people say, well, distributed system could just simply mean something doesn't have a single point of failure, right? Like that server can't go down, therefore it's distributed, which may just simply be, there's a load balancer in front of it. And then we've also got systems that have been designed over time that are somewhat distributed in the sense of like we've seen new databases come along, like NoSQL type of databases where you don't have to lock everything in order to sort of make the transaction, and it eventually becomes consistent. The kind of seminal example of that is, Facebook doesn't have to lock all 1.5 billion users just because Aunt Mary wants to click like on your picture, right? Like the system wouldn't work that way. But I get the sense that like when we talk about something like Bitcoin, or not Bitcoin, like blockchain or any of these distributed ledger systems, distributed means something different because we're talking about not only a transaction, which kind of has to have finality, but also the ability for kind of anybody to see what's happening with it, right? Like it's not, like Aaron said, it's not sort of walled off. The public would have access to seeing, sort of read access, not write access. I feel like somewhere in there is what this new distributed means, but I'm not exactly sure which one or which parts are right.
Yeah. Something I like to do with my students. So I teach at Columbia University as well in the business school, and it's a good challenge because they don't have any technical background for the most part, and so trying to kind of communicate these concepts can be a little heady. So one thing I like to have them do right when we start the web3 is the course is called digital literacy, and web3 is a big part of it. So I like to have them just buy $5 of Bitcoin, $5 of Bitcoin on Coinbase, right? Sure. And the reason I like to have them do that and then just send it to somebody else in the class, the reason I like to have them do that is because it's funny, there's a lot of misconceptions and questions that come up. And I find that like when you're learning, especially in this space, like asking good questions is like even more important than just getting somebody telling you all the answers, right? So like some of the questions that come up, if you do that, or if anyone listening is doing that and trying to make sense of all this, is when you buy it on Coinbase, you might ask like, well, what did I just buy? And like, where is it? And what you'll learn is that, you'll learn, well, you may learn that, if I sent you $5 of Bitcoin right now, the idea is theoretically like that I sent you Bitcoin and there are no intermediaries in between. So that's really powerful because I'm able to send you something peer-to-peer, me to you, without a bank in between, without, people will say, what about Venmo? Well, actually, like if I send you something on Venmo, there's a central server, there's somebody in between us, right? So what's really kind of like cool and important about this is it really comes back to that idea of trust. It's like we don't have to trust anybody. I can send it to you, you can send it to me in a completely theoretically decentralized world or technically decentralized world. Like that's what's happening, and that's super cool. Like that's like at its core what Bitcoin is doing for money, right? And then you can imagine we extrapolate that to chat. I can chat with you, I don't have to worry that someone is in between listening or censoring us, yada, yada, yada. We could, all data flow could like follow that. And, it really comes it reminds me too of like, if you are familiar with Napster or LimeWire or BitTorrent or some of those ways, it's like, I can send you an MP3 and you can get it, and we don't have to, go through Spotify. So I think if you kind of understand like the idea of the network, of a distributed network or a decentralized network, and using actual examples and seeing it for yourself, you'll start to ask questions, and you're like, wait, well, who's Coinbase? You know what I mean? And then I think you'll start to learn that like, actually, like the way things are in theory, like completely decentralized is like the theory or the goal, isn't always how things are in reality, right? So you asked this question about on-ramps, and I mean, Coinbase is this company in between that's facilitating that interaction between you and I, right? And so it's like, oh, wait, but you just said it was completely decentralized. Now there's this, like, which way is it? And I guess the way that I think of it is that like Coinbase is just an example because they're like the biggest in the space of an exchange, a place that we can purchase cryptocurrency and send cryptocurrency. But if you really want the decentralized experience of me sending you money, Bitcoin, and you receiving it without anybody in between, we actually need to move off of Coinbase and use maybe like a Trezor or some other kind of wallet. So there are ways to do it, but Coinbase is like this on-ramp. It's the way, specifically in the United States and a lot of countries, that I can take my USD currency, my fiat currency, and exchange it into Bitcoin. But once you're in that world, once you have the Bitcoin, we can move off of Coinbase, and then we are kind of living the idyllic life of like, we're sending stuff in between without any intermediaries. But the entire Web3 space, like the entire space isn't all completely decentralized. In some ways, it's like an ideology or like a promise of like what could be. And in reality, though, there's like these on-ramps or centralized players that like haven't evolved or may never evolve. I mean, this is like a live laboratory, I think, of people figuring out what the right level of decentralization and distribution is.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it's like you said, I think a lot of this is, as you're educating people, is trying to put like real examples out there for them, right? Because if you sort of explain things, it's like, well, somebody made up this concept of money, and then there's these things, and people are going, but what is that? So I think it's helpful, like you said, to sort of, even start with your students and go, hey, buy $5 worth of Bitcoin, and let's just sort of see the mechanics that go on. Let me pull back the curtains a little bit. I think that's
totally.
really important. So if you're somebody trying to learn the Web3 space, like is everything in this domain, like we talked about NFTs and there's this concept of metaverses and sort of virtual worlds, like does everything start with cryptocurrencies? Like, do you have to sort of get that foundational piece in place first, or can you sort of be like, look, I'm an artist, I really just kind of want to learn about NFTs? Or, I mean, is it the same sort of thing of like, I've got plenty of friends who will tell me like, look, I'm not really good at managing money. I don't really understand the stock market, but I'm a pretty good plumber, or I'm a good artist, or like, is it that same sort of thing? Or do you, is it sort of, you got to get your basics, your footing under you of some fundamentals of cryptocurrency first before any of this other stuff makes sense? Does that make it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I guess the question is, if you're listening and you want to get into Web3, where do you start? What's the prerequisites and all that kind of stuff? I often will just try to bring us back to 1996. Like, imagine the internet, the World Wide Web has only been around for a few years, and people are trying to figure out what the hell it is. And that's where we're at. So whatever answer I give now, I think in 6 months or 12 months will evolve, because a year ago nobody was even talking about NFTs. Now everybody's talking about DAOs, decentralized organizations, and there's going to be more. So this is a constantly evolving space. And again, if we're at 1996, it's basically like somebody being like, I want to understand the internet, Yeah. And back then there was, I don't know how people remember this, but cyberspace, that was the dream. And in many, many ways, when people talk about the metaverse, it's like almost identical to what cyberspace was, because it wasn't just this like place this technical place that you were going to go play around in or buy things or whatever. But it was this just like libertarian kind of ideology of like governments won't exist and we'll live in digital identities. And like, I mean, I actually think there's some like really beautiful writing about it and like some really cool, there's like something to it. And at the same time, I'm just sharing that to say that like, I think there's a lot ahead of us because we're still in the exploration and dreaming phase of like what this becomes. So to kind of wind back to your question, I don't know that there's one specific place to start, and I don't know that it needs to start with cryptocurrency, but maybe one way to break it down is there's maybe a few kind of higher level categories of like ways to get into this, and I'll just list those, and then we could go wherever direction. But cool. But I would say, first, I'll just list them. I would say there's NFTs, right? You could understand what that is from an art perspective or from an identity perspective, which, I think there's a whole talk, I could talk about that. But there's NFTs. Then there's the cryptocurrency. And I would say that involves DeFi, which is like a decentralized way to make loans, to get interest, and to do a lot of other really creative stuff. So we have NFTs, we have DeFi, and I would say there's also organizations now, DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, which are people coordinating to either buy things or do things. Maybe a famous one is the Constitution DAO, which 17,000 people came together, tried to buy the Constitution. So I think between NFTs, DeFi, which I would put cryptocurrency into there, just the finance of it, and organizations, I think anyone could start learning about it right now and become an expert in 6 months, I think, only to say that like there's no expert because it's a live lab or it's all evolving. And I think, I think if you're interested in this, I think each of these fields, just there's so much, and they do rely on each other, but I would say maybe just pick a path to start with.
No. And I think the caveats you had are very, they're fair because you're sort of going, look, somebody might listen to this in 6 months and I don't want them to think I don't know what I'm talking about. But I mean, we spend a lot of time in this show kind of doing historic context as well because we've seen things change, we've seen ideas repeat themselves. I mean, it's like you said, there was depending on how old you are listening to the show, like you may remember when we used to call it the information superhighway.
Oh yeah.
And it was the idea that like open source software was a concept, like, oh, people are going to make software together and it's not going to have lots of bugs. And, so I mean, like concepts emerge. There's times when people say like, oh, stuff's crazy. It doesn't look anything like what I'm used to. But, the context of it is, like you said, like it's going to change. At some point, you just kind of need to jump in and you may jump in the water and decide like, this isn't for me. But, kind of what we've always said to people, no matter what the technology is or what is like, you're not going to learn it without sort of getting in there, learning to learn, getting some scars and scabs, and then figuring out if it makes any sense for you. So, I mean, I appreciate the way you sort of laid that out in terms of it's sort of like identity. It's, there's a economics aspect to it, and then there's an organization aspect to it. And I think maybe if you think about it in those pillars, there's ways to, like you said, dig in and figure out what interests you, what makes sense to you, what might solve a problem for you.
And Chris, let me throw one other at you as well, because I feel like this is another one that's critical for the audience. How does the concept of a smart contract fit into all of this?
Sure. Yeah.
That's something you always hear kind of used interchangeably in a lot of the other terminology as well.
Yeah, sure. For sure. A smart contract is, well, I'm going to assume that the audience doesn't necessarily have programming experience, but if you are programming, it's very common to have these like if-then statements, like if this happens, then something else happens. If I pay $5, then I get a candy bar, right? The original smart contract metaphor was made by a guy named Nick Szabo, and he used a vending machine to kind of illustrate the concept of you put in a quarter, you get M&Ms, right? What if you could do that programmatically on the internet, right? And so a smart contract really is just code, a file. So there's like different, they call them, I would say it's like ecosystems. There's like Ethereum, which is like, I call it an ecosystem because it's just a bunch of people working and apps. And I call it an ecosystem because Ethereum's not a company, right? It's like the internet's not a company, right? It's like a network, So within Ethereum, if you're developing apps using that blockchain, Solidity is the name of the programming language which you would develop your smart contracts. If you're working on Bitcoin and you're developing smart contracts on Bitcoin, you would use a smart contract language called Clarity with a C. Clarity, built on stacks, and it goes on and on. There, depending on which ecosystem, but across all ecosystems, the idea of a smart contract, again, I'll just repeat it. It's like this file or files, these programming language, and they do this if else thing. Why would you want a smart contract? So you could do really cool things that like you can't do. You couldn't do prior, and it's taking like cryptocurrency or taking just like digital currencies and putting them into that like vending machine. So for example, like you could have, I guess I could use, let me think. I'll use like, if you wanted to fundraise and you wanted to buy like the Constitution, right? Or the Amazon rainforest or whatever, if you wanted to get enough people together to buy something, you could make a contract that everybody could send money to, right? You send like $100 worth of Bitcoin to you. And basically that money could get locked up in that contract, meaning it would just be like held in there. And, one of the cool things is that like that money could stay in there programmatically until it reaches a certain amount. And if it reaches a certain amount, maybe it makes a purchase and it buys that thing, right? You could think of like a Kickstarter almost. And this is just one example. I'm just giving one specific example of many types of smart contracts. But, you have a few thousand people, they want to buy a thing and they want to do it without any, with anybody in between. We're not trusting a Kickstarter. You just want to trust the code, the open code. And so we could each send $100 worth of Bitcoin to this contract. And if we hit our goal, we purchase the thing. If not, it's automatically returned to everybody. Like this is the kind of stuff you could do. And all of that code would be open source. Anyone could read it. You don't have to worry about if the government falls, the code will last. If the company goes out of business, the code will, the code is just code. It's just, mathematically sound code. So that's the idea. And that's just one specific example, but there's plenty of other things that you could do with them. So I'll just pause there to get some other questions or reflections.
Yeah, no, I think it's useful to, again, sort of take it down to that next level and go, okay, here's these constructs, and then there's programming languages within them, right? Like we've gone from, that's kind of the next evolution of stuff. It's static. It's got a GUI that you can do stuff with. It's got a programming language and API. That sort of expands out what people can do, and like you said, it gives you a little bit of that freedom to be like, I can kind of do whatever I want in the system, right? Like the code's out there. I can kind of play around with it. I can reuse the skills I had in Web 2. And I think that's very, very cool. Is there sort of a canonical, right? Like Aaron and I go to enough conferences and so forth, and everybody wants to do their Hello app and show me a WordPress site and, whatever they spin up as their first thing. Is there sort of a canonical Hello World app for Web3? Or, if you were doing 1 month over again as like, hey, I'm not going to teach like LampStack and Python and stuff, but I'm going to do it for sort of quote unquote Web3, like what might that look like? What are the things beyond, say, those couple of programming languages? Like what are the things people should be learning?
Ooh, yeah, I have thoughts on that. And just touching back on something we chatted about a few minutes ago, because the space is so big, there's not, we talked about there's like at least 3 categories: NFT, finance, and organizing. I think, there's probably Hello Worlds within each of those. So I could give a few, I'll just give a few examples, but I'm just saying like, I don't know that I'll scratch the surface. But maybe like to reframe the question though, when I think of a Hello World is basically like, what's the least amount that I could do to make something cool happen with like, code, and it's always like it's just like a good feeling usually if you're trying to learn whatever, you're trying to learn Flutter or some new programming language, and you could just like make a basic thing happen. You get this like good feeling. I think, in Web3, I think a few of those moments would be, I don't know. Well, I think there's just a lot of good resources out on the web. I don't know that I can like summarize.
Yeah, and we may just we can put stuff in the show notes too. So we may just hit you up afterward to go, hey, let's put some good links in here that you've sent off to your people or to your students and stuff. That's cool too.
Yeah. Two places that I've used to learn. There's a bunch, but two places that have when I was learning smart contracts and learning to just do some creative stuff. So one is a site called superhigh.com, and they have a Web3 course that I really like. And some of the things that you do there are just interacting with the wallet. So what I'd recommend is, like, if you're totally new to this, like buy $5 worth of Bitcoin and then try to get like a web wallet and figure out what that is. So a web wallet will allow you to buy NFTs, and then if I'm sending you money with my web wallet, it's completely decentralized. So I'm sending it just you and me. And that's just a thing you could download into I use Brave browser. I think it's the best, but you could use Brave or Chrome, and then in either browser, you can just get a web wallet. And the two I use the most are for Stacks, I use the Hero wallet, HIRO wallet, and for MetaMask and for Ethereum, I use the MetaMask wallet. And so I just have those, in my browser. And as I go to new Web3 sites, they become also my login, which is amazing because logins are broken on the internet right now, right? We have usernames and passwords, and you make these passwords. I can't believe it, but not everybody uses 1Password or LastPass or a password manager, and they have the same password for everything, and it's a complete mess, and they write it down and they lose it. But these web wallets act as a way. So if I come to a site like if I want to buy an NFT, right? I can go to foundation.app, right? Or I could go to Stacks NFT, stxnft.com. These are different sites that are marketplaces for NFTs. And with either of them, I don't have a username and password. I just click my web wallet, and it's basically my login, right? And it allows me to purchase things, chat, all this stuff with just the web wallet. So that's the context to say, back to the hello world. I think the first thing you can do is you can create using just JavaScript. You don't even need to write a smart contract or anything. Just using JavaScript, you can make an app that allows people to interact with your web wallet. And it can just, when you click a button on the page, it could be send me a certain amount of ETH, you know what I mean, for like a purchase, or tip me or something like that. And where we might use something like Stripe or PayPal or something right now in Web 2 to facilitate the transaction fees or the transaction, now we can use web wallets. And just using some simple JavaScript, you can do that. And kind of full circle coming back to the links, I would say that's what the Superhigh, the first kind of hello world that they do, which I really appreciated, does. It just shows you how to make a really, really quick site to incorporate purchasing with the web wallet. That would be a good one. So the Superhigh one. And another one is there's something called Clarity Universe, which helped me write smart contracts for Bitcoin. And that's Clarity, Clarity. I could put that in the notes. But between those two, I think, it was like a really great primer to me, kind of going from Web 2 programming to some of these new skills.
No, that's a great list. It's like you said, it's an awesome starter list. There's probably a million other ways to do it, but I'm gonna kind of trust not only you being very well organized for having taught people in the past, but they're all things that you've used yourself. So we'll get those people for the show notes. Like you said, most of those things you can do without barely spending any money. It might cost you $5, and everybody should be able to do that sort of stuff. Very cool. Well, listen, we have gone for a while. We probably could go several hours. I know you don't have that much free time to spend with us, but we're super grateful that you did give us some time today. Real quick, you're working on something called stacks.btc. Kind of give us real quick a plug for what that is and why you're working in that space and kind of what people might expect if they interacted with it.
Yeah. So to clarify, I'm working in the Stacks ecosystem is what it is. So we talked about smart contracts. So most people don't know that you can write smart contracts for Bitcoin, and Stacks is they're basically the layer 2, or they're basically the technology that allows you to use Bitcoin kind of like it's Ethereum or like it's Solana. So what that means is like you can now create apps that are secured by Bitcoin. And this was just relaunched actually, well, as of recording this today, I don't know if you want to say the date or not, but basically January 2021, just as 1 year old. So it's very new. And I think it's really exciting when I learned about, the ability to, because Bitcoin is the most secure settlement layer, right, on the internet. In my opinion, I could say we could argue that, but I think that really is true, and that's what I believe. And so when I learned that, that's I put all my energy this past year into helping build apps on Bitcoin, basically. So on the Bitcoin network. So that's specifically what Stacks is doing. And I say it's an ecosystem because it's not just me. It's like hundreds of people working and cross collaborating, and it's really exciting. And there's a Discord for if anybody wants to get involved, you can go to the Discord, or you can learn more at, I think it's just stacks.org or something like that. So that's what I'm working on.
Good stuff. Nice. Aaron, you are now 40 minutes smarter on Web3. That's what I can give to you this week.
Yep. That's exactly true.
You want to wrap it up and take us home?
Yeah, absolutely. So Chris, thank you very much for your time this week. And for everyone out there, thank you again for listening, and encourage everyone, if you have, wherever you get your podcasts, if you have the ability to leave a review, please leave us a favorable review, and also tell a friend as well. And so on behalf of Brian and myself, thank you again for listening this week, and we will talk to everyone next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.